Hello and welcome to I Heard It on a Podcast, our little corner of the Wild West. My name is Riley.
And I'm Isaiah.
Isaiah, I have wanted to talk about this topic for at least 2 years. It's been on my
Yeah.
podcast topic idea list for a while. And at first it sounds boring, but I'm hoping that this is an interesting conversation. I want to discuss speed limits, whether they should still even exist, how they'll change moving forward. Maybe with automatic cars. Wait, not
Self-driving
autonomous
cars.
cars. We already have.
automatic cars.
Yeah. And how other countries do it differently, as far as we understand, and why that might be better or worse.
Sure. I do remember talking about this, and I think it's a conversation that I've wanted to have for a long time too. But every time we bring it up, we say no, we have to save it for the podcast because we've
Yeah.
started to talk about it offline in lots of other
In our regular
environments or whatever.
friendship.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited for this, and I have a lot of opinions. So
Okay, so I think this originally came to me because I am of the opinion that speed limits are too high in the wrong places and too low in the wrong places. For example, every day on my drive to work, I drive in a one lane going each way with a bike lane and some parking. Right next to houses. And the speed limit there, I think, is 35. So people go 43, 44, 45.
yeah,
And it would take probably 2 seconds for a kid to get out of the car and then get in the road.
Right.
Because parking is already in the road, basically. And I actually feel much more comfortable when the speed limit, when the school zone is active and everyone has to go 20 miles an hour. And I conversely feel that highway speeds are too slow. That it's not very negligible of a difference between 65 and 80, but everyone goes 80 anyway, so why not just make it that?
Yeah, I think I know there's obviously regulations and reasons that speed limits have been set generally for the most part. I know on any streets that have driveways, they can't be faster than 35. So if there's even just one driveway in a huge section of road for a mile or something, I think that whole section has to be 35. And I know they've done studies on the average reaction time and how far it takes to stop. And I think something that influences speed limits nowadays is just how much faster modern cars can stop than cars from even 10 or 15 years ago. I watched a YouTube video the other day that was talking about how this the new Ford Mustang, one of the top trims, is the fastest car to stop now, and it can stop in I don't remember what it was. It can stop from going 60 in 100 feet or something like that. So it's
that would hurt.
it ends up being 3.5 or 4 car lengths, and you're stopped, dead stop. So that would really hurt. And I think it's 1.6 G's or something like that you experience of acceleration to stop.
I mean, I'd rather experience 1.6 G's than hit
infinite.
someone.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a big factor when I don't know, my Jeep probably stops from 60 and maybe 210 feet or something like that. It's a huge difference. Cars have come a long way in terms of one, just material science and the ability to design better braking systems, but also in the ability to have computers control them. ABS is a huge thing too, because cars without ABS take a lot longer to stop. So I think there have been a lot of technological advancements just in the cars we even have now that make speed limits a little bit obsolete in a way, in some areas. But I do agree. And I think it's interesting that the one speed limit that everyone seems to follow are the school zone speed limits. Everyone speeds everywhere else, but everyone is always going 20 in a school zone. And I don't really get that.
I think it's a heightened respect for life. You can at least see the kids that are affected by this change in your behavior, being the speed
Sure.
limit. But when you're going 80 and a 65 on the highway, you don't really see like what could happen. You don't see like the potential repercussions, I feel.
What do you think the difference between like, because a school zone is double fines, right? If you get pulled over in a school zone, you get a double fine.
Hmm.
And that's the same in work zones, but
Yeah,
everyone speeds in work zones still.
especially the ones that happen for years and
Right.
years. It's hard to not. So again, with the work zones, if there's workers, I'll slow down
Sure.
because
Especially if they're like standing right by the cones or
I
whatever.
see like, wow, one little micro movement of my hands and that person dies.
Right.
But when it's nighttime or whatever, the work's not happening and you just kind of want to get home, there's much less incentive, I think, to actually change your behavior. Which brings me to my thesis. In other countries, streets are designed in a way to encourage certain speeds.
Mm-hmm.
So, like downtown, all the streets are cobblestone and the parking is a foot away from the cars,
Mm-hmm.
and the lanes are thinner, and all of those things tell your brain subconsciously to slow down.
Sure.
Like you don't have as much control here. There's not as much space. You need to only go 20 miles an hour.
Sure.
And they don't, I mean, they probably have it posted there too, but it's not as much of a problem because
You feel
it would feel reckless
Yeah.
to go more than 20 miles an hour, and it feels like the correct speed for that type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then highways, huge wide lanes, multiple lanes, go fast. It's fine because this is the place to go fast when you're not trying to like get into a driveway or turn into a McDonald's or whatever.
Right.
So I think that should be highly embraced. Like around school zones, all the lanes should get tighter. There should be, I don't know, barrier between you and the bike lane, and then the bike lane maybe has a barrier between them and the sidewalk. And then on open roads, it can be wider and it can encourage faster movement. But I think just posting a sign and saying, hey, you need to slow down by 10 miles an hour because there's a driveway a mile away that you can't see doesn't work.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with trying to design infrastructure like that is anything that was built a long time ago or relatively long time ago has like what you're saying, like narrower roads, cobblestone. Like that's how it is in a lot of European cities. Like they're more pedestrian friendly almost and more hostile towards cars, I guess. But part of the reason that America is what it is and the economy is what it is that it's really easy for us to get stuff around the country and like move stuff through the country, like on trucks or buses or trains. And if you make it so you can't have, semi trucks in your city, then you're not going to get anything from anywhere. So I think there's a lot of logistical problems, and that's why there's specific guidelines for how wide a lane has to be and like what angles need to be set up for trucks to be able to make turns, and like there's height restrictions, so things have to be a certain height and stuff like that.
I don't really want to live in a place where semi trucks decide how my environment is. I think this is maybe a hot take. I think that commercialization and commoditization should fall below enjoyment of your space.
I would agree, and I think there's always going to be the reality that some places have to have that because otherwise you're not going to have those things. But I think it will get better too because I can foresee with autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles and, drones and like light aircraft like that, the need for big trucks to come into cities being a lot less. Like I could see it being a reality where big, maybe they have autonomous like trailer trains, like they have those in Australia where you've got like 3 trailers linked together and they get driven to like a depot where everything gets like broken up into drones or into small delivery vans or something like that.
Right.
And those then go out and distribute it like the last mile. I can see that being something that happens, and then that frees up the whole city to be whatever you need it to be, for the enjoyment of the people who
Yeah.
live there.
I as far as I understand, that system currently exists in some mostly European
Mhm.
countries where, yeah, of course, like the restaurant needs to get their delivery of food, but the restaurant is in the pedestrian focused part of town, and so they just have smaller trucks deliver their stuff. And I know that that's like not as economical, and it's arguably worse for the environment.
Yeah, and you pay for it in higher prices, like as a consumer.
Yes, I just think that the safety that would come along with that style of living and like prioritizing our transportation that way is worth the higher cost. Less deaths, more taxes.
What about
That's my platform.
okay, it sounds great in theory. What about like ambulances? Like ambulances are big and they need to be able to get to you if you're like having a heart attack.
I don't have an answer for that. My only thought really is smaller ambulances. Or like, are we really going to like change, think of how much time you spend near roads or on roads. It's
Yeah.
kind of insane. It's kind of gross. Are we really going to change or keep all of that the same when we could change it and make it better for like one specific scenario?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. But it seems like we wouldn't do that in another situation.
Yeah. I think that's a big topic and maybe for a different episode because there's a lot of more controversial things we could probably say about city planning and
Oh,
commercialization and all
that
that
could be
stuff.
5 episodes. But yeah, I
But
think American dependence and hyperfixation of vehicles causes a lot of problems, not just related to travel or transportation directly, but indirectly of like how it splits up a city or how it actually costs the taxpayers more because they have to repair all these roads all the time or a multitude of different reasons.
yeah, which to be fair, like the comparison between obviously here in Europe isn't apples to apples because we are a huge country. And so, to an
Yeah.
extent, the dependence on vehicles makes more sense because generally things have spread out more than they would in Europe or be able to in Europe. Um, and so, like, I don't know, driving to get here tonight, like, it's 25 miles away from my house, and I go through, grassland for 25 miles. And if I had to, like, take a bus or an Uber or walk, that wouldn't be as feasible. So I think to an extent, like culturally, it makes sense. But no, I agree. And I think there's room to explore that in the future, especially because so many people are like working from home now and so much more of our lives can be lived in a smaller space almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as necessary to like own a car as it used to be. You can get food delivered and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I think there's room to explore that, but
What do you think of my thesis that fast should be faster and slow should be slower?
I think I agree with faster, and in some situations I agree with slower. Um, there are like in the UK there are like traffic control barriers where they'll put like choke points almost in roads at intersections that are
Mm-hmm.
like just barely wide enough to fit a car, and they've got like bollards on either side, like concrete pillars, and so you have to slow down to make sure you're not gonna like scuff your car on the pillars,
Yeah.
and that slows you down enough for that. And I think that makes sense in some areas, like really built up urban areas or places with a lot of foot traffic. But I don't necessarily think that like every like residential street should be a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
All right, we can agree to disagree.
Okay. I do agree with the higher speed thing though, and I think the speed limits here on the interstates are 75. And in
In this
some
state.
yeah, in some states it's 80. Um which in those states, like in the states that it's 80, it could probably be 100 and that'd be fine.
Yeah.
It's getting to the level where like the mechanical and like physical condition of your car is becoming the safety issue at that point and not like your ability to stop or like avoid obstacles because some tires are only rated up to like 95 miles an hour before they'll like explode,
Hmm.
and your brakes maybe can't take that much heat before they like fade or like
Right.
there's a lot of problems with going that much faster. I think that's probably part of the reason why things have like stagnated at that kind of like 75, 80, because it's getting to the point where like sure people in new cars are gonna be fine, but anyone who's like in a 1990 minivan is gonna struggle. And if they think they're allowed to do 100 and they try to do that, they might just like blow a tire off and crash into a ditch. So I think I think ideally it would be faster, but I think it's gonna be something that lags because you're dealing with such a wide range of like technology and drivers and stuff like that.
Hmm. That's one of the many things that we can tackle when everyone has a self-driving car, if that ever happens. My thought though is, how many times in a year are you wishing that you could drive faster than 80 miles an hour versus how many times in a year are you driving 30 or 35 miles an hour?
It probably depends. For me personally, I'm at this point probably like 50-50 split between like 35 and 80. Um, I think I generally wish I could go faster more when I'm going fast already, because those are typically for like longer trips where like
Mm-hmm.
speeding actually has like an impact. Because if I speed 10 miles an hour in the city, I maybe will get to my destination like 10 seconds faster. Like it really doesn't make that
Yeah.
much of a difference. But if you're going like 10 or 15 over on the interstate over hours, you might cut half hour, 45 minutes off of your trip. So I think generally when I'm on the interstate is kind of when I wish it would be higher.
Do you think if we had like a sit down conversation with all of the American people, theoretically, and we said, all right, guys, we'll give you going 95 on the interstate if you promise to not speed in the city? You think the average American would take that deal?
No, I think they would go 100 and still go 40 in the city or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I think the generally accepted like speed for people in America is like whatever the speed limit is plus 5. And that's just kind
Yes.
of what most people
You
do.
won't get pulled over and
Right.
in trouble for that.
Right. So it's kind of interesting that like to us, speed limits have become like the minimum speed. Like you have to be going 75. But if you go over, then that's cool too, you know?
Yeah. There's even like on some interstates separate speeds minimums for like
Right, like
large
55
trucks.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, I guess that makes sense. It is dangerous if everyone else is going 80 and you're going
Hmm.
35. But I don't know. I just feel like it's outdated. It feels antiquated. It doesn't feel like it's, like you're saying, it doesn't feel like it's made for our cars that we have today. And it also doesn't feel like the like one governing document that applies to all roads in America should sh- is the right choice. Like I think San Francisco should have a different code than Wyoming. Like they're vastly different demographics and like populations and purposes for transportation.
I think a lot of it's up to the like local municipality too, but I think it's just easier to generally adopt what everyone else has adopted. And so it's
Yeah.
more out of like laziness and lack of wanting to do your own research and like figure out what is best for your city, and more of like, well, this is like the nationally accepted thing. We're just going to take that and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, I think I don't know. On the other hand, it maybe should be one national standard, because you would you would not want to say, all right, like you were saying earlier, you wouldn't want to say in San Francisco you only get 3 inches on the outside of your car, and so
Right.
you got to drive slow. If I was like a shipping company trying to decide if I'm going to base my port in San Francisco or in LA, and
Right.
LA didn't have that rule, I would move my billions of dollars of business to LA.
Right.
So I think the rule should be the same in San Francisco and LA and everywhere else in the country. Just more regulation.
Nice. I think I'll disagree on that one. But yeah, I think it's so dependent on the area, and like in Sydney, like in Australia, they have a lot of roundabouts in the city, and those I love roundabouts. Like they're the best because
They're fine.
you never have like just waiting at a light for no one there, and if there's no one there, you can just go straight through. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but if they're busy, they seem to like, if people know how to drive in them, they seem to self-regulate traffic very well and not let areas get too blocked up because the people in the roundabout have the right of way. And so if there's a lot of people coming from one direction, that intersection will be flowing that direction until there's not people, and then it opens up for other places. And so it kind of is like a self-regulating light almost. Um, and they function as like built-in speed checks because you can't, if there's a roundabout every block, you can't get going that fast before you have to slow down for another
Mm-hmm.
roundabout. So they work really well in that regard, but I'm just convinced that Americans can't drive in roundabouts. Like there's a roundabout by my apartment, and I was waiting to go into the roundabout, and someone was coming from the left, like in the roundabout, and they like stopped in the roundabout
Oh,
and like waved me into the roundabout. And I was like, that's not how this works. Like, you're not just gonna sit there.
yeah. Just keep going. I'll be in a half of a second.
Right. So stuff like that, or like people who change lanes in roundabouts, or last minute go across all three lanes to do an exit. It would take some adjustments, but I think those are a great solution to a lot of the problems that we have.
When you took driver's ed, did you do like a roundabout thing? Did you like practice them or learn about them theoretically?
I think I just learned, I don't think I did anything like in a car. I think I learned about them in driver's ed, and really the only thing that I remembered, at least, I don't know if it's the only thing they taught, but was just you yield when you're going into it.
Mm-hmm. I think I also learned about it theoretically, but never actually practiced it on my like driving lessons.
Yeah.
Um, I think a part of the reason why that is the case is because a lot of the roundabouts in our area were built after we got
Hmm.
our
Yeah.
licenses. We're getting a little older in that regard.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe they're teaching it now, and maybe it's like more of an integrated part of driving education now. Although driving education is also not standardized. Like you
Right.
can go to whatever driving school you want or none at all, and then pass the pretty easy
Like
test.
15 questions or whatever.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you can get, I think it's 25 at least when I took it, and you can get 5 of them wrong. So you can get like a C on your driving test and then go out and drive a 2-ton bullet.
And the questions are like, when you see the sign that says stop, what should you do? Like,
Yeah, so there's probably a lot of different facets to making driving safer in
yeah.
America and more convenient too. And speed limits are just one little part of that.
Maybe we can kind of wrap everything up and we can talk about Germany and the Autobahn, because that's
Okay.
kind of a typical thing that people would go to in this conversation
Mm-hmm.
is the Autobahn has no speed limit. Like you get on the Autobahn and you're good. And actually, the Autobahn is just like a word for highway, like interstate, basically.
Okay.
So there are several roads that don't have speed limits in Germany. And the actual highway that people consider the Autobahn um, is sections. There's sections that do have a speed limit because they're more built up or they're curvy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it's unrestricted. And I think the reason that that works so well is because one, it's a lot harder to get a driver's license in Germany, and two, they have, I think, every 3 years you have to renew it, but you have to renew it by doing the test again. You don't just get to like go online and say you want another one.
Yeah, that's what I did. And I haven't been like quizzed on my driving education
Right.
since I was 16.
16.
And
Yeah.
I even still have the same picture of when I was, I think, 18,
Right. 21, I think, is when you
21.
redo them. Yeah.
But I'm good with that picture, my 21-year-old picture, until I'm 31.
Right.
And I don't think they will ever ask you to take the test again as long as you have a decent driving record. And by decent, I mean like it wasn't revoked.
Yeah, because you only have to retest if you get enough points to have your license revoked, or you like get a DUI or something like that.
Hmm.
So there are people who are like 90 years old who haven't taken any driving tests since they were 16,
Yeah.
and their mental faculties have declined and their physical faculties have declined. And there's not like, unless your family has your license revoked, you can just keep driving
Right.
legally, which
Right.
is crazy. The other thing in Germany that is helpful with that is people, because they take the test so often and they constantly like driving is more of a privilege and less of a right, I think.
Uh-huh.
Is they're a lot more attentive, and it's just kind of the German culture anyway, but like a lot more attentive to the laws, and so they are very disciplined with like lane discipline, and they'll stay right
Hmm.
until they want to pass, and then they get into the fast lane to pass, and then immediately get back over. So there's no one who just sits in the left lane for 10 miles and blocks traffic. And so because of that, you can, you can be doing 120 miles an hour in the left lane, and if someone's passing ahead of you, they'll see you coming and they'll get back over and wait to pass until after you've passed them. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're just really good at kind of like managing those speed differentials, because you will have that situation of you're going 120 past a truck that's doing 60, but because they're also aware and they're so like disciplined in which lane they should be in, it works.
Hmm.
So it's kind of interesting that it's almost just like a cultural thing at that point, you know?
I think another thing will be done soon. Another thing to be aware of is like why someone might have to slow down on a street. If you think about your regular downtown street in any mid-sized city, it's full of like pulling into the parking lot of Ace Hardware or whatever, and you have to slow down 5 miles an hour to make that turn safely.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going from a street that's going 45, and then you have to slow down to go 5 miles an hour and turn into it, which is just like a very poor design.
And I think places are getting better about that. Like even like the city that I live in is being retrofitted to have more turn lanes, like for right turns.
Mm-hmm.
Like a left turn lane would be, so you can get into the turn lane before you start to slow down, so that you're not getting rear-ended by someone behind you, and it gives you more space to do that. But I do agree that there's a lot of poorly designed roads that were designed 20 years ago or whatever
Yeah.
that need to be redone.
I don't know this, but I would guess that the Autobahn has a very limited number of entrances and exits,
It's like an interstate.
and they are very like specifically designed. So like where some of our interstates, they do that like cloverleaf
Cloverleaf, yeah.
thing, and you have to go 15. You have to go from going 80 to 15 within I don't know, a quarter of a mile.
Yeah.
I would guess that there's less of those
Yeah.
because that's probably the most dangerous part of interstates.
Yeah.
Is
No,
like where you're changing and having to make decisions.
and thankfully they're like getting rid of cloverleafs a lot of places too, and kind of redoing that. So I think generally we're on the right path, but it's just slow.
I just am bummed that we're on the right path for like convenience of drivers and not convenience of like humans.
Yeah.
Not like the convenience of the people not in cars.
Yeah. You can always move to Europe.
Don't tempt me. Thank you for listening to I Heard It on a Podcast. We've got new episodes every Monday, wherever you find podcasts, including YouTube.
Yeah. And if you'd like to connect with us, we're on Instagram and Threads. And you can also email us if you want to chat with us at hello@ihearditonapodcast.com.